What Barbarian did to nuns was worse than you imagine. The morning of September 14th, 1470, began like any other at the convent of Santa Caterina. Sister Eleni, the 43-year-old abbess, stood in the stone chapel as pale sunlight filtered through narrow windows, casting golden stripes across the worn floor. Her fingers traced the silver crucifix hanging from her neck, a gift from her mother before she took her vows 20 years ago in Constantinople, before the great city fell to the Ottoman forces. "Sisters, let us begin our morning prayers." Eleni's voice echoed softly through the sacred space. 22 other women in simple black habits knelt on the cold floor. Among them was Sister Irene, whose weathered hands trembled as she clutched her wooden rosary. At 62, she was the eldest, her face mapped with lines that told stories of devotion spanning 4 decades. Beside her knelt Sister Magdalena, barely 19, her young face serene as she whispered prayers in Greek, her voice pure as spring water flowing down the Thessalian mountains. The convent perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the Pineos Valley, its stone walls thick enough to withstand winter storms that howled down from Mount Olympus. Pine trees surrounded the compound, their scent mixing with incense that perpetually hung in the air. For 2 centuries, this place had been a sanctuary, a refuge where women devoted their lives to God, away from the chaos of a world constantly torn by war. Sister Theodora, who managed the convent's small garden, had noticed them first, distant figures moving through the forest like shadows. She had been collecting herbs when the glint of metal caught her eye. "Abbess Eleni," Theodora's voice cracked as she burst into the chapel, her basket of rosemary and thyme clattering to the floor. Riders, dozens of them, coming up the mountain path. Eleni's stomach dropped. She moved quickly to the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the morning mist she could see them, armored men on horseback, their banners bearing unfamiliar symbols. But it was what followed that made her blood run cold. 4-wheeled cannons, their bronze barrels pointed toward heaven like accusing fingers. "Gather everyone in the chapel," Eleni commanded, forcing her voice to remain steady, even as fear coiled in her chest. Now. Within minutes, all 23 women assembled. The youngest, Sister Magdalena, clutched the hand of Sister Anna, who at 35 had been at the convent for 15 years after fleeing an arranged marriage in Athens. Sister Irene's breathing came in short gasps, her age making even simple movements difficult. "What will they do to us?" whispered Sister Sophia, 27, whose hands wouldn't stop shaking. Before Eleni could answer, the first cannon blast shattered the morning silence. The entire building trembled. Stone dust rained from the ceiling as the women screamed, dropping to their knees. Another blast followed, then another. Through the window, Eleni watched the bell tower. Built in 1298, its bronze bell had called them to prayer for generations, crack and crumble, massive stones tumbling down the mountainside like broken teeth. The bombardment continued for 30 minutes that felt like 30 hours. Each explosion made the women flinch, their prayers rising in desperate chorus above the sound of destruction. When silence finally fell, it was somehow worse than the noise. Heavy footsteps echoed in the courtyard. The wooden gates, reinforced with iron bands, groaned under assault. Then came the splintering crash as they gave way. The door to the chapel burst open. Armored men poured in, their faces dark with dirt and sweat, their eyes scanning the huddled women like merchants appraising livestock. They spoke in Turkish and Arabic, languages foreign to most of the sisters, but their intent needed no translation. A tall man entered last. His armor was finer than the others, decorated with silver inlay. A thick beard covered half his face, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, calculating. He surveyed the room with the confidence of someone accustomed to taking whatever he desired. "I am Hassan ibn Mahmud," he announced in heavily accented Greek. Commander of the 4th Cavalry under Sultan Mehmed's banner, this region now belongs to the Sultan. You have a choice." He paused, letting his words settle like ash. "Convert to Islam, accept the true faith, and you will be treated fairly. Resist, and you will be taken as prisoners to our territories in Anatolia. There you will work until you either see reason or die in your stubbornness." Sister Eleni rose slowly, her legs unsteady but her spine straight. She clutched her silver crucifix, feeling its familiar weight against her palm. Around her, the other sisters looked to her with terrified eyes, waiting for guidance. "We are brides of Christ," Eleni said, her voice carrying through the chapel with surprising strength. "We have devoted our lives to God. We will not renounce our faith for any earthly power." Hassan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Was it respect, disappointment, anticipation? "Then you have chosen your path," he said quietly. "Bind them." The soldiers moved forward with ropes and chains. Sister Irene cried out as rough hands grabbed her arms, the metal shackles biting into her thin wrists. Sister Magdalena sobbed, her young face contorted with fear. One by one, the women were chained together in a long line like pearls on a broken necklace. "We leave at dawn tomorrow," Hassan announced. "Pray to your God tonight. It will be your last comfort for a very long time." That night, locked in their own chapel that now felt like a prison, the 23 women huddled together. Sister Eleni led them in prayer, her voice never wavering even as tears streamed down her face. Sister Irene's breathing grew more labored, and Sister Anna held her gently, trying to ease her discomfort. "Why is this happening?" Sister Magdalena whispered to Sister Theodora. "What did we do to deserve this?" "We did nothing wrong, child," Theodora replied, stroking the young woman's hair. "Sometimes the world is cruel to those who seek only to live in peace. But our faith is not in this world. It is in something greater, something they cannot touch with their chains and weapons." Outside, they could hear the soldiers celebrating their conquest, their laughter and singing an obscene counterpoint to the prayers within. The smell of roasting meat drifted through the broken windows. The raiders were slaughtering the convent's small flock of sheep, consuming in one night what would have fed the sisters for months. As darkness deepened, Sister Eleni moved among her sisters, offering what comfort she could. She paused beside Sister Irene, who lay on the floor, her breathing shallow and rapid. "I'm afraid, Mother Abbess," Irene whispered, using the formal title. "I'm an old woman. I won't survive what's coming." Eleni knelt, taking the elderly woman's hand in both of hers. "Then you will go to God before the rest of us. You will be free while we still suffer. Perhaps you are the Blessed One." Irene managed a weak smile. "Pray for me when I'm gone. Don't let them throw me aside like refuse." "I promise," Eleni said, her voice breaking. "I promise." As the first light of dawn began to creep across the mountains, painting the peaks in shades of pink and gold, the chapel door opened. Hassan stood silhouetted against the morning light. "It's time," he said simply. The march to captivity was about to begin. The soldiers unchained them from the walls, but immediately reshackled them in a long line, each woman connected to the next by heavy iron links. Sister Eleni found herself at the front, directly behind Hassan's horse. Behind her stretched a chain of terrified women, their black habits already gathering dust in the early morning light. The path down the mountain was treacherous, even under the best circumstances. Now chained and stumbling, it became a nightmare. Sharp rocks cut through their thin sandals. Sister Irene, near the middle of the line, gasped with each step, her aged body struggling under the weight of the chains and the demands of the descent. By midday they had reached the valley floor. The September sun blazed overhead, turning the metal chains into burning brands against their skin. The soldiers allowed them no rest, driving them forward with shouts and occasional blows from the flat of their swords. Water, Sister Sophia croaked, her lips already cracking. Please, just water. A soldier laughed and spat on the ground beside her. They walked through villages that had been recently conquered, their churches desecrated, their populations fled or dead. In one abandoned square, Sister Magdalena saw a child's doll lying in the dirt, one arm torn off, and began to weep silently. "Don't look," Sister Anna whispered to her. "Keep your eyes forward. Think of prayers, of psalms, of anything beautiful you can remember." As the sun began to set on that first day, Hassan finally called a halt near a dried riverbed. The women collapsed where they stood, too exhausted even to speak. The soldiers brought them water, not much, but enough to keep them alive, and stale bread that they devoured with trembling hands. Sister Irene couldn't eat. She lay on her side, her chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow movements. Sister Eleni crawled to her side, the chains dragging. "Irene, please try to drink something," Eleni urged, holding a wooden cup to the old woman's lips. "I can't, Mother Abbess," Irene whispered. "My body, it's giving up. I can feel it." "No, don't say that. We need you. We need everyone to survive this together." But Irene's eyes held a knowing that couldn't be denied. She reached up with trembling fingers and touched Eleni's face. "Tell my story, all of our stories. Don't let them erase us from history." "I will," Eleni promised, tears streaming down her dust-covered face. "I swear it." That night, under stars that looked down with cold indifference, Sister Irene died. Her last breath came as a soft sigh, and then she was gone, released from her suffering. The soldiers were indifferent. "Bury her quickly," Hassan ordered. "We leave at dawn." With no tools, the sisters used their bare hands to scrape at the hard earth beside the road. Their fingers bled as they dug, mixing their blood with the soil that would receive their sister. They laid Irene in the shallow grave, arranging her hands in prayer position across her chest. Sister Eleni spoke the prayers for the dead in Greek and Latin, her voice carrying through the night air. The other sisters responded with the liturgy, their voices creating a haunting harmony that made even some of the soldiers pause and look away uncomfortably. They covered her with earth and stones, marking the spot with a crude cross made from tied branches. Sister Magdalena placed a small wildflower on the grave, the only beauty they could offer. "Forgive us, Sister Irene," Eleni whispered. "Forgive us for not being able to give you more." The next 6 days blurred into an endless repetition of pain and exhaustion. They walked 20 miles each day through increasingly harsh terrain. The mountains gave way to rocky plains where the heat reflected off the ground in shimmering waves. Several sisters developed blisters that burst and bled, leaving bloody footprints on the road. Sister Sophia collapsed on the 3rd day and had to be dragged for half a mile before she could walk again. On the 4th evening, as they made camp near an abandoned caravanserai, Hassan approached Sister Eleni. 2 soldiers grabbed her arms and pulled her away from the other sisters, who cried out in protest, "Leave her alone!" Sister Theodora screamed, struggling against her chains. "She's a holy woman! Don't you dare!" A soldier struck Theodora across the face, silencing her. Hassan led Eleni to a large tent set apart from the others. Inside, oil lamps cast dancing shadows across carpets and cushions that seemed obscenely luxurious after days of sleeping on bare ground. A low table held food, real food, roasted meat and fresh bread and fruit that made Eleni's empty stomach clench with hunger. "Sit," Hassan commanded, gesturing to the cushions. Eleni remained standing, her hands clenched at her sides. Hassan studied her with those calculating eyes. "You are their leader. You are educated. I can hear it in how you speak. You were probably from a noble family before you took your vows." "My past life doesn't matter," Eleni said quietly. "I am a servant of God now. That is all I am." "That is all you choose to be," Hassan corrected. "But you could be more. You could be comfortable, safe, fed. You could help your sisters survive what's coming." "By betraying everything we believe in?" By being practical. Hassan poured wine into 2 cups. The world has changed, Sister Eleni. The Byzantine Empire is gone. The old order is dead. The Sultan's armies control these lands now, and they will control more. Your faith means nothing to him. It's just an obstacle to be removed or converted. Then remove us, Eleni said, her voice hard. We won't convert. Hassan's jaw tightened. You're willing to die for invisible promises of an afterlife. I'm willing to die for truth, for something larger than myself, something men like you will never understand. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Hassan gestured sharply to the soldiers waiting outside. Take her, clean her, dress her appropriately. No! Eleni screamed, but the soldiers were too strong. They dragged her to another section of the tent where servants waited, women who looked at her with pity and resignation. They stripped away her habit, washed her roughly with rose-scented water, and dressed her in silk robes that felt like a violation against her skin. When they brought her back to Hassan, she looked like a different person. A noblewoman from Constantinople, perhaps, or a wealthy merchant's wife. But her eyes blazed with fury and shame. Hassan studied her with satisfaction. You see, beneath the poverty and self-denial, you're still human, still beautiful, still capable of being something other than a wasted life in a forgotten convent. You can dress me in silk, Eleni said, her voice shaking, but you cannot change who I am. My body may be here, but my soul is somewhere you can never touch. Hassan's expression darkened. He stepped closer, and what happened next would haunt Eleni for the rest of her life. When it was over, she lay on the cushions, her silk robes torn, her body screaming with pain, her mind fractured into pieces she wasn't sure could ever be reassembled. Hassan stood, adjusting his clothing. You will convert eventually. They all do. It's just a matter of time and pressure. He had the soldiers return her to the other sisters. When they saw her, dressed in silk, her hair uncovered, her eyes empty and staring at nothing, Sister Theodora began to sob. Mother Abbess, she whispered. What did they do to you? Eleni couldn't answer. She sank to the ground among them. And though her lips moved in silent prayer, Latin words that fell from her mouth like stones, her eyes remained vacant, staring at something far away that only she could see. Sister Anna held her gently, and Sister Magdalena wept against her shoulder. The soldiers laughed and made crude jokes, but the other sisters formed a protective circle around Eleni, trying to shield her from their mockery with their bodies. That night, Eleni lay awake long after the others had fallen into exhausted sleep. Her body ached. Her soul felt shattered, but deep inside, beneath the pain and humiliation, a tiny flame of defiance still burned. They had taken much from her, but they hadn't taken everything. She still knew who she was. She still believed. And that belief, fragile as a candle flame in a storm, would have to be enough. On the 7th morning of their march, the landscape changed. The dry plains gave way to rolling hills, and finally they saw it, the Aegean Sea stretching to the horizon like hammered silver under the autumn sun. The port city of Volos spread before them, its harbour filled with ships bearing Ottoman banners. The 22 surviving sisters stumbled down the final hill, their feet bleeding, their faces burned by sun and wind. Sister Eleni walked at the front, still wearing the silk robes Hassan had forced upon her, though she had torn strips from the hem to bind the wounds of her sisters. She had barely spoken since that night in the tent, but her eyes had regained a fierce clarity, as if she had passed through some dark valley and emerged changed, but not broken. The harbour stank of fish and tar and human sweat. Sailors shouted in Turkish and Greek and a dozen other languages as they loaded cargo onto ships. When the chained women appeared, work stopped. Men stared openly, some with pity, others with hunger, most with simple indifference. Hassan led them to a large war galley, its hull painted black, its oars stacked like the ribs of some great beast. The name painted on its bow meant nothing to the sisters, But the ship's purpose was clear. It was built for war and the transport of captives. "Below deck," Hassan ordered. "All of them." The soldiers drove them down a narrow ladder into the ship's bowels. The space was dark, cramped, and reeked of old sweat and human waste. Iron rings had been bolted into the walls, and to these the sisters were chained, 3 to a ring, close enough that they could touch each other, but unable to move more than a few feet. Sister Magdalena, chained between Sister Anna and Sister Sophia, began to hyperventilate. "I can't breathe. There's no air. I can't—" "Yes, you can," Sister Anna said firmly, gripping the young woman's hand. "Look at me. Breathe with me. In, out, that's it. You're doing fine." Above them, they heard the sounds of preparation, the creak of rigging, the shouts of sailors, the heavy splash of oars hitting water. The ship lurched as it pulled away from the dock, and several sisters cried out in fear. Sister Eleni, chained near the front of the hold, began to sing. Her voice was cracked and rough, but the familiar hymn filled the darkness. Kyrie eleison, Christa eleison. One by one, the other sisters joined her. Their voices created harmony in the darkness, transforming the hold of a slave ship into a cathedral. Even when a soldier shouted down for them to be quiet, they continued singing, their defiance expressed in liturgy. The voyage was supposed to take 12 days. It took 14 because on the 3rd day a storm struck. The sisters had never experienced a storm at sea. The ship pitched and rolled, throwing them against the walls and each other. Water poured through the boards above, soaking them in icy seawater. Sister Sophia vomited repeatedly, as did half the others, unable to control their bodies in the violent motion. "We're going to sink!" Sister Theodora screamed, her voice ragged with terror. "God have mercy, we're going to drown, chained in this darkness." "Then we'll drown singing his praises," Sister Eleni called back, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Sisters, with me, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Their voices rose above the howl of the storm, above the creaking of the ship's timbers, above their own fear. Sister Magdalena, who had been sobbing in terror, found herself singing instead, her young voice clear and pure, even as the ship threatened to tear itself apart. The storm lasted 2 days. When it finally passed, leaving the sea glassy and calm, 3 of the sisters had developed fever from the cold water and exposure. Sister Sophia's lips had turned blue, and she shivered uncontrollably, despite Sister Anna wrapping her in her own damp habit. A sailor came down with stale bread and water. He was younger than the others, perhaps 20, and his eyes held something like sympathy as he looked at the chained women. "Where are you taking us?" Sister Eleni asked him in Greek. The sailor glanced nervously toward the ladder, making sure no officers were listening. "Sinop, a fortress city on the Black Sea coast. The Sultan uses it to house, well, people like you, prisoners who won't convert. You'll be put to work in the fortress, cooking, cleaning, maintenance. If you survive a year, sometimes they reassign you to Constantinople as servants in wealthy houses." "And if we don't survive?" The sailor's face grew somber. "Then you don't. I'm sorry. I truly am." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I heard you singing during the storm. My mother was Christian before she converted. She used to sing those songs to me when I was small. I'd forgotten how beautiful they were." After he left, Sister Theodora spat on the floor. "His sympathy means nothing. He's still part of this." "Perhaps," Sister Eleni said quietly, "but small mercies are still mercies. Don't let them make you so hard that you can't recognize kindness when it appears." The days blurred together in the darkness. They had no sense of time beyond the twice-daily appearance of the sailor with food and water. Sister Sophia's fever worsened, and despite their prayers and Sister Anna's attempts to cool her with seawater, she grew delirious, speaking in fragments about her family, her childhood in Thessaloniki, her decision to join the convent after her parents died. "I thought I'd be safe there," she mumbled, her eyes unfocused. I thought God would protect us." "He is protecting us," Sister Eleni said, though the words felt hollow even to her. "Our bodies may suffer, but our souls remain free." "My soul feels as chained as my body," Sophia whispered. Then she closed her eyes and didn't open them again. They couldn't bury Sister Sophia at sea. The soldiers simply unchained her body and threw it overboard like garbage, her splash lost in the vastness of the water. The sisters could only pray, their voices rising through the boards above to follow their sister into the depths. 21, Sister Magdalena whispered, her voice hollow. "There are only 21 of us left." "Then we have to be strong enough for all 23, Sister Eleni replied. "For Irene and Sophia, we carry them with us in our hearts." On the 14th day, the ship's movement changed. The rhythm of the oars shifted, and they heard the calls of sailors spotting land. The sisters clutched each other, knowing their journey by sea was ending, but that something far worse was about to begin. When the soldiers came to unchain them and bring them on deck, the bright sunlight temporarily blinded them after so long in darkness. As their eyes adjusted, they saw Sinop, a fortress city of black stone perched on a peninsula jutting into the Black Sea, its walls rising from the water like the crown of some submerged giant. Mountains loomed behind it, and even in September, snow dusted their peaks. "Welcome to your new home," Hassan said, appearing beside Sister Eleni. He looked pleased, like a merchant who had successfully delivered valuable cargo. "You'll be put to work immediately. Work well and you'll be treated fairly. Refuse and—" He shrugged. "Well, there are many ways to die in a fortress." The sisters were marched through the city gates and into the fortress proper. Citizens stopped to stare at the chained women in their filthy habits, their faces gaunt with hunger and hardship. Some looked away in pity. Others pointed and laughed. Most simply stared with blank indifference. They were taken to a courtyard deep within the fortress, where an official with elaborate robes and a thick ledger stood waiting. He examined each sister, noting their approximate age and physical condition in his book, as if they were livestock being inventoried. "These ones to the lower kitchens," he said, gesturing to Sister Anna, Sister Theodora, and 4 others. "These to the laundry, these to general maintenance." "And this one?" Hassan asked, pushing Sister Eleni forward. The official studied her with calculating eyes, noting her bearing, her educated speech when she spoke, the fact that she was still relatively young and strong, despite the ordeal. "The tunnels," he said finally. "She has spirit. The tunnels will break it, or she'll break first. Either way, the problem solves itself." Sister Eleni's blood ran cold. The tunnels. She didn't know what that meant, but the satisfied smile on Hassan's face told her everything she needed to know. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The tunnels beneath Sinop Fortress were older than the Ottoman conquest, older than the Byzantine presence, perhaps as old as the Romans who had first fortified this strategic peninsula. They stretched for miles beneath the fortress, a labyrinth of storage chambers, wells, and passageways carved from living rock. Some areas were used for legitimate purposes: food storage, weapons caches, cisterns that collected rainwater. Others served darker functions. Sister Eleni and 5 other sisters, Magdalena, Anna, Theodora, Helena, and Zoe, were led down spiral stairs that seemed to descend into the earth's very bowels. The air grew cold and damp, carrying the smell of stone and mildew and something else, something organic and rotten that made their empty stomachs turn. Their guide was an older woman named Aishi, herself a former Christian slave who had converted 20 years ago to escape the harshest labor. Her Greek was fluent, but tinged with Turkish inflections. "You'll work here," she said, gesturing to a large chamber where other women, perhaps 30 in total, knelt on the floor with small hammers and chisels, breaking larger stones into gravel that would be used for construction and road repair. "You break stone, you get food. You don't break stone, you don't eat. Simple." The sisters were given tools and shown to an empty section of floor. Around them, women of various ages worked in near silence, the tap-tap-tap of hammers the only sound beyond occasional coughs and the drip of water from unseen sources. "How long have you been here?" Sister Anna asked Aishi quietly. "Me? I worked the tunnels for 5 years before I converted. Saw many women come, saw many die. The ones who survive learn to do what's necessary." She looked at Anna with eyes that held no hope. "You'll learn too. Or you won't, and your bones will join the others buried in the deep chambers." After Aishi left, Sister Theodora gripped her hammer with white knuckles. "I won't do it. I won't break stones for them like a beast of burden." "Then you'll starve," Sister Eleni said quietly. "Theodora, listen to me. Our faith isn't in whether we break stones or scrub floors. Our faith is in our hearts, in our prayers, in our refusal to abandon who we are. We can break their stones while keeping our souls intact." "Is that what you tell yourself about that night in Hassan's tent?" Theodora spat, then immediately looked horrified. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Eleni's voice was calm, though pain flashed in her eyes. "And you're right to be angry. But we can't turn on each other. That's what they want, for us to fracture, to become too broken to support one another. We're all that's left of Santa Caterina. If we lose each other, they've won completely." Sister Magdalena, who had been crying silently, looked up. "How do we survive this? How do we keep going?" Sister Anna picked up her hammer and positioned a stone. "We do what women have always done. We endure. We adapt. We find small resistances and tiny victories, and we remember who we are." The first day in the tunnels seemed to last forever. Their hands, soft from years of prayer and gentle work, blistered within hours. By the time Aishi returned with bowls of thin gruel, every sister was bleeding from multiple cuts, and Sister Helena could barely hold her hammer. But they had broken stones. They had earned their food. They had survived one more day. The weeks blurred into months. The sisters developed calluses on their hands and learned to work efficiently enough to earn their daily rations. They discovered which sections of the tunnels were monitored and which were forgotten, where they could speak freely and where silence was enforced. In a small chamber far from the main work areas, they found something extraordinary, evidence of previous prisoners. The walls were covered in scratches and carvings, messages left by people long dead, names, dates, prayers in Greek, Latin, Armenian, and languages some sisters couldn't identify. It was a gallery of suffering, a testament to how many had passed through this darkness before them. "Look at this," Sister Zoe whispered one evening when they had stolen a few minutes alone. She pointed to a section of wall where someone had carved a crude cross and the words Anno Domini 1422. 48 years ago, Sister Anna calculated. Long before we were even born, someone was here, suffering just as we suffer. Sister Eleni traced the carving with her fingertips. An idea began to form in her mind, fragile and desperate, but an idea nonetheless. "We need to leave our mark too," she said. "We need to make sure we're not forgotten, that Santa Caterina isn't forgotten, that what happened to us isn't just erased from history." Over the following weeks, whenever they could steal moments unobserved, the sisters used their chisels and broken nails to carve into the stone. Sister Eleni scratched the date, 14th in September 1470. Below it, Sister Theodora carved Convent of Santa Caterina, Thessaly. Sister Anna added the names of all 23 sisters who had been taken, including Irene and Sophia, who had died along the way. Sister Magdalena, whose hands were the most nimble despite her youth, carved 23 crosses in neat rows, one for each of them. The physical act of creating these marks became almost sacred, a ritual that connected them to their past and offered the faint hope of being remembered in the future. But the hardest carving came from Sister Eleni herself. Using a sharp piece of metal she had found, she slowly scratched 4 Latin words into the stone, lux in tenebris lucet. "What does it mean?" Sister Magdalena asked. The young woman had never learned Latin. "The light shines in the darkness," Sister Eleni translated softly, "from the Gospel of John. No matter how deep the darkness, the light cannot be extinguished. We are that light. As long as we're alive, as long as we remember who we are, they haven't won." But maintaining that light grew harder with each passing month. In their second year of captivity, Sister Helena died of lung disease, her breath growing shallower until one morning she simply didn't wake. 6 months later, Sister Zoe was killed in a tunnel collapse, buried under tons of rock that took 3 days to clear. Each death diminished them, wore away at their collective strength. The fortress guards occasionally brought priests or imams to speak with them, offering conversion as a path to better conditions. Some women accepted, not the sisters from Santa Caterina, but others who had been there longer, whose spirits had finally broken under the weight of years. "Don't judge them," Sister Anna said quietly after watching a woman named Maria emerge from such a meeting, her head now covered in the Muslim style. "We don't know how long she's been here. We don't know what she's endured. Conversion might be her only path to survival." "But it's abandoning everything," Sister Theodora protested. "Is it? Or is it recognizing that God sees the heart, not the outward forms?" "I don't know anymore." Anna's voice cracked with exhaustion. "I used to be so sure of everything. Now I'm just trying to survive one more day." Sister Eleni understood that exhaustion intimately. There were nights when she lay on the cold stone floor, her body aching, her spirit worn thin, and wondered if they were fools for clinging to faith that brought them nothing but suffering. It would be so easy to convert, to accept comfortable clothes and decent food, to stop breaking stones in the darkness. But then she would remember Sister Irene's last words, "Tell our story." She would think of the crosses carved into the wall, the names preserved in stone. She would look at Sister Magdalena, who despite everything had maintained a core of pure faith that seemed unshakable. They performed secret communion services with bread stolen from the kitchens, small pieces torn and passed hand to hand in the darkness, each sister whispering the familiar words that connected them to centuries of believers. These moments, more than anything, kept them tethered to who they were. "The body of Christ," Sister Eleni would whisper, pressing a crumb of bread into Sister Magdalena's palm. "Amen," Magdalena would respond, tears streaming down her face. In their third year, a new prisoner arrived, a young woman named Katerina from Crete, captured during an Ottoman raid on her village. She was broken and terrified, speaking in barely coherent fragments about watching her family killed. The sisters from Santa Caterina gathered around her, offering what comfort they could. Sister Anna held her while she sobbed. Sister Theodora shared her meager rations. Sister Magdalena sang the hymns they had preserved, her voice a bridge between suffering and hope. "Why are you being kind to me?" Katerina asked through her tears. "You have so little. Why share anything?" "Because kindness is the only thing they can't take from us," Sister Eleni replied. "They can take our freedom, our health, our lives. But as long as we choose compassion over cruelty, we remain human. We remain ourselves." Years passed. Sister Theodora died. Sister Anna followed. One by one, the light of each candle was extinguished. But the survivors continued their rituals, their secret communions, their carvings in the stone. They taught new prisoners the hymns, shared their bread, preserved their story in any way they could. When Sister Eleni felt death approaching, she had developed the same lung disease that took Helena. Her breath growing weaker each day, she called Sister Magdalena to her side. The young woman was no longer young. 10 years in the tunnels had aged her beyond her years, her face gaunt, her hands scarred and twisted from endless labor. "You have to survive," Eleni whispered, each word an effort. "You have to remember. Tell anyone who will listen what happened to us. Don't let Santa Caterina disappear completely." "I will," Magdalena promised, clutching Eleni's hand. "I swear it, Mother Abbess, I swear it." Sister Eleni died 3 days later, her lips moving in silent prayer until her final breath. They buried her in one of the deep chambers, wrapping her body in cloth stolen from the laundry, marking the spot with a simple cross scratched into the wall. Sister Magdalena survived another 2 years before fever took her, but before she died, she had taught their story to a dozen other women who taught it to others, creating a chain of memory that stretched through decades. The tunnel chamber with their carvings was eventually sealed off and forgotten, buried beneath centuries of construction and modification. The names of the sisters from Santa Catarina vanished from official records, dismissed as unproductive captives disposed of in 1473. But the stone remembered, the crosses remained, waiting in the darkness. September 2011. Dr. Elif Yilmaz wiped sweat from her forehead and studied the ancient wall her archaeological team had just uncovered. The excavation of Sinop Fortress's lower levels had been ongoing for 3 years, revealing layer upon layer of history. Roman foundations, Byzantine modifications, Ottoman renovations. Each era had left its mark on the ancient stone. But this chamber was different. "Dr. Yilmaz, you need to see this," called Mehmet, one of her graduate students. His voice carried an unusual urgency. Elif squeezed through a narrow opening into what had clearly been a sealed storage chamber. Her flashlight beam swept across walls covered in scratches and carvings, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, layered over each other like archaeological strata made of human suffering rather than soil. Then her light found it. In one corner, carved more deeply and carefully than most other markings, a cluster of crosses arranged in neat rows, 23 of them. Beside them, names in Greek: Eleni, Irene, Magdalena, Anna, Theodora. "My God," Elif breathed. She moved closer, her trained eye cataloguing every detail. A date, 14th of September 1470. A location, convent of Santa Catarina, Thessaly, and below it all, 4 Latin words carved with painstaking care. Lux in tenebris lucet. "What does it mean?" Mehmet asked, peering over her shoulder. "The light shines in the darkness," Elif translated softly. "It's from the Gospel of John." Over the following weeks, Elif's team documented everything. They photographed each carving, measured the depths of scratches, analyzed the tool marks. They found other evidence too. Small holes where iron rings had once been bolted, stains on the floor that chemical analysis suggested were blood, fragments of cloth and bone in a deep chamber that had served as an impromptu burial ground. Elif stood in the chamber late one night after her team had left, her flashlight beam tracing the 23 crosses. She had read the historical records, sparse mentions of raids on Orthodox convents, brief notes about prisoners taken to work in Ottoman fortresses, dismissive remarks about unproductive captives disposed of after refusing conversion. But those dry records had never been real to her until now. Now she could see their names, touch the marks they had made with their own hands, stand in the darkness where they had broken stones and prayed and died. She pulled out her phone and called her colleague, Dr. James Morrison, a historian at Oxford who specialized in Byzantine Ottoman transitional periods. "James, I found something extraordinary. 23 women from an Orthodox convent, taken prisoner in 1470. They were held in the fortress tunnels for years. They left their names, their story, carved into the walls." On the other end of the line, she heard James's sharp intake of breath. "Elif, do you know what this means? There are almost no first-hand accounts from this period, especially from women. This could rewrite our understanding of how the Ottoman conquest affected religious communities." The discovery made international news. "Lost voices found. 15th century nuns speak from the darkness," read one headline. "Archaeological discovery reveals forgotten tragedy," proclaimed another. But it was the photographs of the carvings that captured public imagination, especially the 23 crosses and those 4 Latin words, lux in tenebris lucet. Dr. Morrison flew to Turkey to collaborate on the research. Together, he and Elif pieced together the story from multiple sources: Ottoman administrative records that mentioned 23 female captives from Thessaly region, Greek Orthodox Church archives that documented the destruction of Santa Caterina convent in September 1470, contemporary accounts from Italian merchants who had witnessed chained religious women being marched through various towns. "They were here for at least 3 years," Elif explained during a press conference, standing in front of photographs of the carved walls. "Possibly longer. The records are ambiguous about what happened to them ultimately. They were classified as disposed of, a bureaucratic term that likely means they died and were buried in mass graves. But they left their mark," James added, his voice thick with emotion. "They refused to be forgotten. In the deepest darkness imaginable, they carved their names into stone and declared that the light still shone. That's not just archaeology. That's testimony to the resilience of the human spirit." The Turkish government, in consultation with Greek Orthodox Church leaders, decided to preserve the chamber as a memorial. They reinforced the structure, installed proper lighting, and created a pathway for visitors. A plaque was mounted near the entrance, listing all 23 names and translating the Latin inscription into Turkish, Greek, and English. On September 14th, 2012, exactly 542 years after the sisters were taken from their convent, a memorial service was held in the chamber. Orthodox priests from Greece sang the same liturgies the sisters would have known. Turkish officials spoke about the importance of remembering all victims of historical conflicts. Descendants of Italian merchants who had witnessed parts of the sisters' ordeal attended, carrying letters and diary entries that their ancestors had written. Sister Magdalena's hope had been fulfilled. Their story was being told. Among the attendees was an elderly woman named Sophia Papadopoulos, who had traveled from Thessaloniki. She approached Dr. Yilmaz after the ceremony, tears streaming down her weathered face. "My family has a story," Sophia said in heavily accented English. "Passed down for generations. We're told we're descended from a nun who survived captivity, who was eventually released after converting and was sent to work in Constantinople. She married and had children, but she taught them all the hymns from her convent. She made them promise to remember Santa Caterina. I never knew if it was true or just family legend." Elif gripped the old woman's hands. "What was her name? The nun in your family story?" "Theodora," Sophia replied. "Sister Theodora." Elif felt chills run down her spine. She pulled up the photographs on her tablet, showing Sophia the carved name. "Your ancestor's name is here. On this wall. She was real. Your family kept her memory alive for more than 5 centuries." Sophia sobbed, pressing her fingers against the photograph as if she could touch her ancestor across the centuries. She survived. At least one of them survived. Later research would uncover records suggesting that 4 of the original 23 sisters did eventually convert and were released to serve in Constantinople households. Whether they did so out of broken spirits or as a survival strategy that allowed them to preserve their inner faith would never be known, but their names, Theodora, Zoe, Helena, and one whose name was illegible in the records, appeared in Ottoman administrative documents from the late 1470s and early 1480s. The others, Eleni, Magdalena, Anna, Irene, Sophia, and the rest, had died in the darkness, but they had died with their names intact, their faith unbroken, their light still shining. In the years following the discovery, the chamber became a pilgrimage site. Orthodox Christians came to pray where their sisters had suffered. Historians studied it as a window into a poorly documented period. Students wrote dissertations, analyzing the carvings and what they revealed about literacy, faith, and resistance among captive women. A Greek documentary filmmaker created an hour-long film about the sisters, using actors to portray their capture, march, and imprisonment. It won awards at international film festivals and was shown in schools throughout Greece and Turkey, teaching a new generation about a tragedy that had been forgotten for more than 5 centuries. On the wall beside the original Latin inscription, the Turkish government and Greek Orthodox Church jointly installed a new plaque in 2015. It read, "In memory of the 23 sisters of Santa Caterina Convent, taken from their home on September 14th, 1470. They endured captivity with faith and dignity, refusing to be erased from history. Their message carved into stone reminds us, Lux in tenebris lucet, the light shines in the darkness. May their courage inspire all who face oppression, and may their story never again be forgotten." Dr. Yilmaz returned to the chamber often, even after her team had documented everything and moved on to other projects. She would stand in the quiet darkness, her flashlight off, surrounded by the weight of stone and history. In those moments, she could almost hear them. 23 voices raised in hymns that defied their captivity, prayers whispered in darkness, the soft tap-tap-tap of chisels carving names into stone. Women who had lost everything except their identity, who had been buried by history but refused to stay buried. The light shines in the darkness, Elif would think, tracing the Latin words with her fingertips. And the darkness has never overcome it. Sister Eleni would have been pleased to know that her promise to Sister Irene had been kept. Their story was told. Santa Caterina was remembered. The crosses carved into stone had outlasted empires, survived centuries, and spoken when everything else had been silenced. In the end, the stone had remembered what humanity had forgotten, and in remembering, it had given the sisters what they had fought so hard to preserve: their voices, their dignity, their truth. The darkness had tried to consume them, but the light, as they had carved into eternal stone, had shone, and 5 centuries later it was shining still.